Welcome to episode 5 of Secrets of the Universe, Walking the Conscious Path with Steve Hasenberg. I'm Greg Agnew. This episode is titled The Profound Teachings of Near-Death Experiences. So my first question, Steve, is what is a near-death experience?
Thank you for asking.
Of course.
So as you know, I've studied near-death experiences for a long time. And I've been very interested in them because they provide a lens into something that is foreign to us. But as you look at the research, you see that, and I mentioned in video 3, there have been about 180,000 pieces of research about near-death experiences. And there are these common features that are actually very striking. So the individuals who have had near-death experiences through accident or terminal illness, and they're not quite terminal, so they come back and they talk about the experience. All of them speak about learning things when they're on the other side. They call it the other side of the veil, the other side of life. So it looks like life continues after life rather than life ends at death. And so they bring back very important information for us. So the first thing they talk about, and again, this is about 98% of the people who have these experiences.
Right.
The first thing they talk about is the fact that they have a life review.
Is that the your life flashing before your eyes type of the cliche that they have in movies?
That's good. It's not quite like that,
right.
But let me tell you what it's like. So the first thing that happens, and it's similar to my out-of-body experience, one leaves the body, and even though they may be in an operating table, they're watching without any pain. They're in a state of freedom, like I was. They're even in a state of somewhat like a timeless, blissful state, and they watch perhaps the operation going on, or the emergency that gets triggered because their heart stops beating. They're watching this, and then they continue moving on from that body. Sometimes people will stay there, and they'll hear what the doctor's saying, or they'll travel down a room and they'll listen to the TV that's going on. But most people continue, and they go down a tunnel of light. So there's this long, dark tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, there's this brilliant light. And they speed down into this light, and all of a sudden they're greeted sometimes by relatives, people who have died before them, who talk to them. Sometimes what happens is that a being of light comes. It could be, if you're a Christian, Jesus. It could be, if you're Muslim, Mohammed. Could be Buddha if you're a Buddhist. And this being of light actually sits with you and watches a review of your life, and you see all the details. And maybe it feels like a long time,
right?
But in actuality, it could be a split second. So time is different on the other side. And so when you're watching with this being of light, all that you feel is love. And you take a look without judgment. And you basically, again, 98% of the people who came back, I saw where I could have loved more.
When you say that, are they talking about love in a general sense? I could have loved the world, or are they talking about people close to them?
When they were looking over the circumstances of their life, they realized, here was a place where I was warm, where I was compassionate. Here was a place where I could have loved more, where I could have extended myself. And so when they come back, they say, I understand now that my life is for loving. My life is for kindness. My life is for being more compassionate. Not just for the people who I'm with, my spouse or my children, but for the population of the world in general. And as a matter of fact, what The other thing that's very common is that they talk about the fact that they realize that life is all interconnected. So when they're on this other side of the veil, it's as if it's a singular whole fabric, and that everything is happening within this fabric, but whatever happens is interconnected and impacts everything else. So when they come back, they have that kind of ecological sense that not just we're connected to nature, or we're connected to the weather, but we're connected to each other. And my good sense of you, my extension of my heart to you, not just impacts us, but ripples out like a stone thrown into a lake, ripples out into the whole fabric of humanity. And because of that, these people often change their lives.
Right.
Yeah.
So the big question then is, why don't we have that awareness while we're alive and we have this normal life, and very few people have this experience, come back and they have a knowledge that we don't have.
Right. That's why I'm bringing this out. I know I get into this esoteric stuff, but the reason I'm bringing it out is because of the importance of what individuals learn, okay? So love is one of the things, and then I'll get right there, but love is one of the things they come back with. Where can I love more? The second thing they come back with is that the earth, this earth experience, this earth adventure, the way we talked about it, is a school. And it's the school for the soul, that all of us have souls. And so this school that we're in, if we treated it that way, instead of seeing it as an adversary, if we see it as a challenge, if we see it as an opportunity, as a matter of fact, in Chinese character, the word challenge is opportunity and danger.
Both.
Yeah. So if we begin to look at life as as it's always kind of dangerous at times, correct?
Right.
But there's a danger there and there's an opportunity there for me. If we begin to see that everywhere in all of our relationships, all of a sudden life is different. It's not just, oh, I'm protecting myself. I'm a victim. There's an opportunity here for me. Maybe I'm being initiated. If it's a school, maybe this is part of the curriculum. Maybe I'm being initiated. And the third point that people come back with is that they're not afraid of death anymore. And that's powerful, because most people spend their life being afraid of death and trying to avoid it. So they realized in a very profound way that life continues after death. As a matter of fact, they're doing research now at NYU and also at UCLA, where they're giving individuals doses of psilocybin in order to help them with their terminal illness.
And what's psilocybin?
Psilocybin is similar to, it's a mushroom derivative. It's similar to, let's say, acid or ecstasy, but it's more organic. And they're giving this to terminal patients in research studies in order to allow them to feel more comfortable with their imminent death. And it's working beautifully, because the same experiences happen. It's in controlled settings, but they go to these places where they meet guides. They go to places like the heavenly place, where people go after near-death experiences. And these experiences subjectively are incredibly joyous, very, very happy. It feels like one is released from all worldly worries. And so they have these experiences on the other side of the veil, similar to the near-death experiences, and they come back and they're able to live out their lives with so much more equanimity.
So in a controlled experiment like that, knowing that they're about to have that experience, can they control or manipulate the experience in any way? Or is it identical for everyone, no matter who they are?
No, what they do in the research experiences is they have intentions. So you go in with an intention of being able to work through your mortality, let's say, or your fear of death, or the fact that you're going to have extraordinary losses. And by kind of increasing the landscape, making the landscape, we use the word vaster. When that landscape becomes vaster, then people feel more at home with it. As a matter of fact, they often say, I'm at home now. During the psilocybin experience, as they do almost always when they have near-death experiences, I feel at home now. As I did when I had my out-of-body experience, I said, maybe it's time to go home now.
So are they similar, the out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences?
Yeah, and that's the fascinating thing about it, because one is about, I was going to say one is about inner space and one is about outer space. Let me go there, because the astronauts on this show, which Will Smith did on National Geographic Channel, which was called Strange Rock, which is about the Earth, had 4 astronauts on the show. And they talked about the same thing, which was, in this vastness, feeling the interconnectedness of everything, feeling like, yes, they felt Earth was their home, but the preciousness and the joy that they experienced looking at the Earth and knowing throughout the entire universe, the only place perhaps where there is life as we know it is here. And yet it should be sacred, but it isn't. So there's a similarity between the outer space experience and the inner space experiences of psilocybin, of near-death experiences, but also of meditation. And so all of these are very, very connected. There is a joy inside of us at a deeper level. We have joy. It comes and goes. It's fleeting. But there's a more permanent joy inside of us. For those of you who are meditating, you've experienced some of that from time to time. And that is deepened exponentially when people have these near-death experiences. So I think what the most important points to take from this video series is that whether it's a near-death experience, whether it's a meditation experience, whether it's an experience on a mountain overlooking the ocean, whether it's an experience on a psilocybin trip that is controlled in a specific way, what we're tapping into is the extraordinary width and breadth of who we are. This is all within us. The near-death experience is actually within us somewhere. It's hard to find, but it's not dissimilar from the homecoming that we feel when we meditate. So the idea is how do you do this for yourself?
Right.
Right?
That's the obvious question. That's what everyone wants to know. How do you get that? Well, how do you get that intensity of home, as you described it,
right,
without taking psilocybin or without having a near-death experience?
Right.
How do you trigger it and find it? Because all of us deal with life. You know, life is so busy and so distracting.
It is.
It's hard to push that aside
Right.
and have that type of depth.
Right. It's the best question. It's the best question.
I'm sure everyone's thinking it, yeah.
We all have a hunger for it, right? And it's the very reason that I started meditating myself when I was in my 20s, because prior to that, I had, experimented with acid and psilocybin and other things. And I had some extraordinary experiences of coming home and kind of knowing what the universe was, but I always left them. I would have it and I would leave. I would have it and I would leave. And I thought, well, I'd like to have this all the time. And so I started to meditate. You know that I started transcendental meditation, and then I started teaching it. So the way to have this, there are two aspects to this. One is that if we know that home in its most vast width and breadth lives inside of us, and we know that greater joy lives within inside of us, then it behooves us to get inside.
Right.
Right? So there are different routes to get there. And as I've said in previous tapes, I'm not somebody who says you have to take one particular route to get there. There are 1,000 routes up the mountain. Some are more difficult, some are easier, right? So for me, getting up the mountain was to start meditating. For another person, getting up the mountain and having this experience could be learning Buddhist mindfulness. Another way, some people do it by running. I have runners who come into my practice who say, when I'm at the 10th mile or the 12th mile, I'm in the zone. And that zone is very much of an experience of being at home, feeling like I'm outside of the worries that are normal for me, outside of my mind, and I'm just this energy running. There's so many ways. For me, it's been meditation and mindfulness.
So really, people need to experiment, find their own path, their own way.
They do.
If they're looking for that, if they're yearning for that.
They do, but
Right.
And I'm going to add one more because I think it's one that we don't think about. And that is what they said from the near-death experience that was the most important one, extending love. When you have an experience of love with your wife, with your girlfriend, with your daughter, with your dogs, with your cats, you go into a more timeless space when it's strong. We usually feel it when a dog dies. We may not feel it enough when a dog is alive. So the preciousness of that experience needs to be practiced. Let's make a decision that we want to practice preciousness, that we want to practice love, that we want to be of service, that we want to extend ourselves to other people. This is a way of beginning to align with the soul and the spirit that lives inside of us.
One of the interesting things about being a human is you're so busy thinking of your life and how you're living and what you need to do and traffic and employees and bosses
Right.
and all these things that we don't tend to be in the moment that much.
True,
And I know
Greg.
there's mindfulness and there are other
Right.
instruction ways, but
True.
as humans, it's almost like we're built not to do that.
Right.
So it seems like a real challenge to overcome the restrictions we have to find that peace.
It's the truth of how we live, right? But in previous videos, we've talked about the fact that we've gotten to this place of being consumers of degrees of stress, of degrees of worry, of degrees of anxiety, where we're not living. So in some ways, for the people who are listening at least, some of us have to be the pilgrims, the people who are going to go there first. We have to make a decision. We don't have to, but we could. How do I want to live? Do I want to live in the state of stress? Do I want to use the martini technique at the end of the day, or do I want to use the meditation technique at the end of the day? How do I want to treat the people I meet in the store, at the retail shop, my parents, my friends? How do I want to live this life? It's a very important philosophical question. And then once you make that decision, there are extraordinary ways of deepening that preciousness, deepening the presence. What presence is just stillness. And anybody who meditates understands that the more stillness they have, the more effective they are in anything, with anything in their life.
What will you have in episode 6 of this series?
Well, I've been saving the story about a near-death experience that I want to tell everybody. And what it does, this story weaves together some of the things we've talked about in previous episodes from sacred traditions. And it weaves together some of the things we're talking about right now. So hold on for a very, very cool story.
Great.
Yeah.
And if you want to participate in the series, you can email Steve. Details are at the end of this video and also at stevehasenberg.com. Thank you for watching Secrets of the Universe, Walking the Conscious Path with Steve Hasenberg. I'm Greg Agnew.